Hello again, my name is Debbie, and today I'm going to share with you a collection of ephemera that is about 268 Park Street. This ephemera validates the time periods of 268 Park Street. It breathes life into the black and white pictures. I don't think about the Sands as people who built this beautiful house, but they were loving parents and doting grandparents just like me. I'm going to have to break this ephemera into 3 sections. The first ephemera pieces catalog the time period between 1894 and 1956, a span of 62 years that Gardner and Olive Sands graced this home. The second section I will focus on a document that Mrs. Sands' daughter Marjorie wrote that includes stories about the house she grew up in and some of the family stories that give you insight into her parents. And the last section will focus on the ephemera that is from Pentwater area itself. The 4 plat maps that show you the layout of Pentwater and the surrounding areas. There are 2 time periods, one before 1894 and one post 1894. For example, you can see on the plat maps the horse track, the Sands and Maxwell Lumber Company, Frenchtown, Middlesex Brick Company, and the last plat map identifies the piece of WBO Sands land that was given to Gardner Sands. This is a picture of William Butler Ogden Sands, who was originally from Chicago and came to Pentwater after the Civil War. Mr. Sands actually led an all-black regiment out of Illinois during the Civil War. Of course, Mr. Sands was also the one who died from being shot by a disgruntled employee, Samuel Minchell, in 1896. If you're interested in that story, I will link it in the description box below. So this is a picture of 226 Park Street back in 1896, actually. This is actually known as the Haunted House of Pentwater. But you're also seeing some pictures of Mr. Sands' office that was in the house. Gardner Trill Sands was the oldest son of William Sands and took over the management of the family business until a fire destroyed the furniture factory. He decided not to rebuild, possibly because his only son died when he was 12 years old, and during that time period it wasn't felt that women were competent to operate a business, so he simply retired rather than continue. This is Gardner T. Sands' obituary out of the Michigan Tradesman, February 20th, 1929. Gardner died in California during the winter of 1929. He was playing golf with 2 attorneys and a doctor, and he died right after making a hole-in-one at the Virginia Hills Country Club. They brought him back to Pentwater by train for burial, and all the way back across the country, whenever the train stopped, officials from the railroad boarded the train to pay their respects to Mrs. Sands. In this picture, you see a young Olive who studied violin in Chicago and was supposed to be very accomplished. For a while, she was a soloist at the First Presbyterian Church in Chicago and was invited to play at the opening of Hull House, which is a whole entire different story. Olive Sands died at Butterworth Hospital in Grand Rapids. Mrs. Sands had been bedridden for several years due to severe arthritis. She spent the winters in Grand Rapids with her daughter, Mrs. Phyllis Woodlock, but summers she always spent at her Pentwater home. This is what the house originally looked like when it was built in 1894. This is a picture of Ogden, Phyllis, Marjorie, and Olive Sands. You've got to appreciate the fashion of the early 1900s for boys. Unfortunately, Ogden died at the age of 12 from a burst appendix. Marjorie Sands was the daughter who moved to Long Beach, California, where Mr. and Mrs. Sands wintered, and Phyllis Sands married Wallace Woodlock and stayed in Michigan. I can so identify with this family picture of Gardner and Olive with their daughters and their first granddaughter. Their first granddaughter was born with a cleft palate, and the Sands financed that surgical repair. This is one of the last pictures of Mrs. Sands with her daughters in her bedroom at 268 Park Street. Up at the top, you will actually notice a picture of what the room looked like in 2011 when we did our walkthrough. These next two pictures are actually postcards that were used to advertise the Sands guest house. Mrs. Sands rented out her rooms in her house, sold eggs, raised rabbits and chickens to keep her home during the Depression years. You gotta give this lady a lot of credit. We found these letters in the wall of the smallest bedroom when we did some renovations. If my calculations are correct, Marjorie might have been about 14 years old when these verses were written to her. Maybe it was her birthday or a piece of paper from a yearbook. As you can see, a mouse enjoyed nibbling. It's amazing that something so fragile would last 111 years. One of the poems said, "Think of me now, think of me ever, think of the fun we had together." Another one said, "As sure as vines grow around the stump, you're my sweetest sugar lump." And they were friends that I could read: Doris, Benjamin, Walter Myers, Gladys, and Margaret Mead. Patricia Woodlock Glaza was one of the granddaughters of Mr. and Mrs. Sands. As a child, she spent her summers at her grandmother's house at 268 Park Street. She shared many great memories of her childhood with me, as well as information regarding what the house was like during her grandmother's lifetime. Pat was married at 268 Park Street, and the next series of pictures are from her wedding. The tea room was Phyllis Woodlock's idea to keep her childhood home. She opened the Memory House Tea Room on June 30th through Labor Day for 3 years. I would love to open an antique shop and call it the Sands Memory House. I think it would be so appropriate. The following pictures show the dining room and fireplace setup. Notice the mid-century dining room chairs. The townspeople also commented upon the linen tablecloths and napkins. Unfortunately, all things come to an end. The article in the Pentwater News stated the former Gardner T. Sands home, for many years one of the showplaces of Pentwater, has been purchased by Stuart J. Roche of Hart. Mr. Roche purchased the property for Mrs. Phyllis Woodlock of Grand Rapids, daughter of the late Mr. and Mrs. Sands. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our 268 Park Street ephemera. It's been fun collecting pieces of the past. If you like our content, please subscribe and click the bell so you'll know when we load another video. Is there anything specific you would like me to research about 268 Park Street? If there is, put it in the comments below. I've enjoyed spending time with you today and hope to see you in our next video.